During their initial encounter, Stanley and Helen were both working at the same place of employment. Within the same organization, the young people held executive roles, and their places of employment were situated near one another within the office complex. On one side, Helen was a young lady who was incredibly eager and determined, and she was accustomed to always achieving the goals that she set for herself. On the other side, Stanley has always been a pleasant and compliant individual who steers clear of disagreements and conflicts without question. It must be true what they say about opposites attracting in the most unexpected ways. This is undoubtedly the reason why Stanley and Helen started dating quite promptly, and how they went on to become a stunning couple that was noticed from everyone on the street. At that point in time, the young people had been in a relationship for a little more than a week when they made the decision to move in together. Helen was the one who initially considered the idea of living together. She was always maintained the very realistic approach to the majority of things in life. The young woman quickly gained the upper hand over the peaceful and passive Stanley by asking, "Why spend money on living in two apartments to live separately if we could just live together and save money? Why spend money on living in two apartments to live separately?" Having a measured lifestyle and working in a sedentary position gradually did their job. Helen was the first person to notice the expanding girth of her waistline, and Stanley was the person who followed closely after. Both of these practices contributed to the slow gain of weight. Helen was taken aback since it called into doubt her status as the most beautiful lady working for the organization. On the other hand, Stanley did not think that his expanding belly was something that should have generated any cause for alarm. Initially, Helen would only make fun of Stanley, and she would make him blush every time he stood on the scale. This was the start of their relationship. It was clear to the man had a good reason to feel that way when it came out that Helen's jokes were very mean to him. A number of problems that had been buried for a very long time have been brought to light as a result of the fact that the young man had a tendency to rapidly gain excess weight ever since he was a toddler. This has brought to light a number of issues that had been kept hidden for. On the other hand, it is one thing when people you do not know think you are overweight. It is an entirely different thing when someone you care about holds the opinion that you are overweight. One day, as a consequence of this, Stanley lost his anger, and when Helen began to whine about being out of shape once more, he strongly encouraged her to sign up for a membership at the gym. The fact that Helen agreed caused a tremendous excitement for Stanley, and as a consequence, the young people went out and got an annual membership at the gym the very next day after they received the news. It is important to note that Stanley, who had completely different expectations regarding the manner in which the workout would proceed, was left with an indelible mark following the very first workout that the two of them conducted together. The young man felt ashamed and embarrassed because he looked like a fat seal compared to the fit and pumped-up gym regulars. To add salt to injury, Stanley was not only unable to use the treadmills and other pieces of equipment at the gym, but he also lacked the expertise essential to accurately operate them. This was a double-edged sword. On the other hand, Helen was able to navigate the gym with remarkable ease and quickly became accustomed to her surroundings, much like a fish in water. She was able to feel comfortable and confident in her surroundings. It was undeniable that this had a considerable influence on Helen's growth, and her physical appearance started to respond to this influence particularly soon after it occurred. The additional weight that Helen was bearing vanished right in front of everyone's eyes, and she made it a point to remind Stanley of this fact whenever she got the opportunity to do so. On the other hand, Stanley was unable to lose even a single pound, despite the fact that he put in a lot of effort and was really driven to lose weight. Because of Helen's condescending attitude and the fact that there was no progress being made, Stanley was feeling disheartened, and it took him a lot of effort to even find the will to keep trying. He was dejected. In light of the fact that Stanley was going through a particularly challenging period, he required the assistance of his girlfriend more than ever before. Unfortunately, Helen was preoccupied with her own personal accomplishment in losing weight, and she was persuaded that all of Stanley's concerns and fears were nothing more than excuses for a lazy, obese man. Even though her demeanor was hurtful to Stanley, he clenched his teeth and persevered through everything. It's possible that Stanley's behavior may be explained by the fact that he was a very calm man who didn't want to get into a quarrel with his girlfriend and possibly even lose their relationship. As time passed, Helen's insults became more stinging and sophisticated, which did not in any way contribute to the strengthening of the bond between the young people. At one point, Stanley even had the idea that Helen was putting him down and making fun of him in order to make her accomplishment appear even more meaningful. This was Stanley's perception from the beginning. Therefore, as a direct result of this, the young people stopped participating in the things that they normally did together nearly totally. When it came to getting out of the house and going to the gym before Stanley did, Helen never failed to find a way to do so. She never missed an opportunity. During the time that she was present, she acted as if she had no prior contact with him. The fact that Helen felt embarrassed by him was something that Stanley was well aware of, and he was of the opinion that he did not deserve to be seen with someone who was similar to Helen. Helen did not experience the bad effects of the lack of attention she received from other people because she went on an increasing amount of time with new friends and trainers. This allowed her to avoid the negative impacts of others' lack of attention. When Stanley approached her in the gym, she just ignored him because he didn't feel like putting up with her pranks. This was done in an effort to build a deeper bond with her new friends. Stanley did all in his power to get Helen's attention once more, but she consistently refused to acknowledge his presence. During the middle of their combined workout, Stanley took a stance and walked out, with the intention of shaking Helen and compelling her to reevaluate her attitude towards him. This was the moment that the relationship reached its breaking point. The unfortunate part is that Helen did not follow him. In addition, she did not even pay any attention to what Stanley did, and she continued with the workout as if nothing had happened. Even though Stanley was now accustomed to the fact that Helen was only interested in her own physique and the gym, which she now went to every day as if she worked there, he still found it extremely difficult to accept the reality that Helen was only interested in those two things. During the course of each day that passed, the two individuals drifted increasingly distant from one another. Helen did not believe that an overweight guy like Stanley deserved to be by her side, despite the fact that she was experiencing a sense of emotion. Even though Stanley was well aware of the fact that his physical condition was not in the best of shape, he did not believe this to be a sufficient reason to stop a connection with another individual. In the event that they felt the need to do so, he was of the belief that they were capable of handling any problem that they encountered as a couple. It is a great disappointment that Helen did not share this sentiment and perspectives. During the time that Stanley was attempting to reinvigorate their broken relationship, he found a new lover who, in a peculiar turn of events, turned out to be the trainer from the exact gym where they had been working out together. On that dreadful evening, Helen arrived late from her workout, and Stanley made the decision to go pick her up due to the fact that she was late. It was first difficult for him to comprehend what he was witnessing while he was observing the young couple leave the gym from a distance. However, as he approached, he was able to see Helen smiling cheerfully and holding hands with a young man who was pretty attractive. He was able to observe this when he came closer. With the intention of having dinner at the cafe, the young couple eventually arrived at the establishment after strolling for a short distance and eventually came to a stop there. Stanley's world was submerged in confusion. It was after he had spent some time observing the happy couple that he went back to his home. Late in the evening, Helen made her way home. The young girl gave a terse response to Stanley's inquiry about where she was saying, "I went to have dinner at a cafe." Stanley's inquiry was directed toward the young lady's location. To what end? The food that is served there is not only delicious, but also beneficial to your health. You big folks are the only ones who don't comprehend it. The truth is that I had intended to pick you up from the gym today, but instead I observed you hanging around with another man. Stanley added with a hesitant tone, I was going to pick you up from the gym. That's my personal trainer. Whoa, that's who. When did you settle that you would follow me? What else is there to say about this? I'm sick of you. It's time for us to end our relationship, Helen said in a sudden and abrupt pronouncement. It was the morning of the following day that she packed her belongings and left, leaving the door slammed behind her as she went. Stanley experienced a state of depression as a result of coming into contact with this information. He started eating even more in an effort to dull the anguish, which, of course, led to him gaining even more weight almost immediately. He did this in order to give himself a sense of relief. Stanley was under the assumption that his life had come to an end and that the world did not have any room for those who were overweight like him. He was convinced that his existence had concluded. When Stanley finally came to the understanding that he was to blame for the fact that he had decided to spend his entire life with a person who loathed him and did not place any importance on their relationship, it took him a bit of time to come to terms with the reality that he was the one who made the decision. As Stanley came to the awareness that Helen was not the right woman for him, he also came to the realization that he might consider their relationship to be an amazing example of important life lessons. Upon coming to this realization, he grinned at his reflection in the mirror as he looked at himself. It was then that Stanley made the decision to demonstrate to himself that he was not a weak, overweight man, as Helen had imagined he was, but rather a determined individual who is capable of accomplishing anything he sets his mind to. He made this his motto. Stanley went back to the gym, but this time he hired a personal trainer who was able to figure out the most effective technique to engage Stanley in physical activity. As was to be expected, the effects of a year's worth of laborious effort and sweat were seen. When the dreaded extra pounds started to disappear right in front of Stanley's eyes, he couldn't believe anything that was happening. Every day, Stanley lost weight, and his figure was getting closer and closer to being picture perfect. In addition to this, Stanley began to take pleasure in his workouts, and they eventually became an essential component of his overall existence. Following the completion of his efforts to achieve exceptional physical condition, the young guy made a decision to transfer occupations and enroll in a training program in order to become a trainer. Stanley rapidly had customers waiting in line to receive instruction from him because he was so great at his new business. This was due to the fact that Stanley was so skilled at his new career. It is not surprising that the youthful and athletic trainer rapidly garnered a lot of popularity among the women who attended his sessions. This is something that should not come as unexpected. When young ladies were in Stanley's presence, they would regularly engage in flirtatious behavior with him and take pictures with him for their personal pages and social media accounts. As a result of the young coach's success, he completely forgot about Helen, who had been so cruel to him over the course of the previous year. On the other hand, if he hadn't received an email from his ex-girlfriend, he wouldn't have even considered the memory of them being together. Helen expressed her desire to meet up and have a conversation in the letter that she wrote. Although Stanley was uninterested in Helen's email, he considered to meet with her at the cafe regardless of his feelings. In the cafe, Helen never stopped complimenting Stanley's accomplishments and highlighting the positive aspects of his character. A moment later, she made the following statement. You know, I've given it some thought, and I'm ready to get back together with you. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind if I started afresh. Stanley hesitated for a moment after attentively listening to Helen, and then replied, I'm sorry, but I want a girlfriend who wouldn't just share my victories with me, but who would also support and motivate me during difficult times filled with failure and uncertainty. As a result of Stanley's remark, it became evident that they would never get back together again. And for the very first time since they had broken up, Helen became conscious of the huge mistake that she had made. The question of whether or not she had a genuine realization or whether or not she was only attempting to impress Stanley in the hopes of getting him to take her back is a difficult one to answer. No matter what the circumstances were, Stanley did not appear to care about them. He was going to begin a new life that was full of highs and lows, but he would be free of his toxic ex-girlfriend and any emotions of self-loathing. He was going to start a new life.